Good morning.
Good morning.
So you drew the short straw and had to do the first one, huh?
Yes, that's all right though. Glad to be here either way.
Good. Great performance last night, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Yeah. So I gotta ask you to start with the outfits last night were awesome.
Oh yeah.
Where'd you guys get matching outfits like that?
So we have there's a store in New Orleans. It's actually a friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine. When I first moved down there, her name is Candace Gwynn, and she has a store called Trashy Diva. Started off as like a vintage, it started off as like a vintage store, and then she had made like one dress that sold out in an afternoon back in I guess like 1999 or 2000. So now, I mean, they've gotten really, really well known like internationally. They sell dresses like in size 0 to 22, and they'll take like a certain fabric and they'll cut it in like all these different styles for different body types for women. And then they just started doing men's shirts too. So they've sponsored me for a long time for festivals. So that was what we wore for French Quarter Fest this year. And so now that back in the day, I never really had any other women in the band. So it was always just for me. And then I had 2 other ladies in the band. Now it's just the one. But now they make the men's shirts too. So they always give us stuff for big festivals. That's awesome.
It was great. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I never really was into like the matchy thing with bands. But if you're gonna give me really nice, expensive, free clothing, I will take it and I will make my band wear it. And it's cute stuff too. It's not like it's, silly looking or anything. So
Very nice.
Thanks.
So where did the persona Gal Holiday come from?
So, I mean, the persona itself is sort of like I've always been in theater and mostly in theater and in music, had a stage persona. For whatever reason that is. It was maybe back in the day it was easier to get up on stage as someone, not as myself. And so the Gal Holiday persona really just came from at the time I was really into rockabilly and western swing. And, it was sort of like this whole idea of maybe being some distant relative of Doc Holliday or something, it's not really any more deep than that. Mostly just as a function to make it easier to get up on stage in front of people, I think.
Nice. So of all your personas, which one's been your favorite?
Well, let's see. I've had a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. Butterfly Capone, Butterfly du jour. My name means butterfly, so that's where that comes from. But yeah, I mean, Gal Holiday is the one that really has. Gal Holiday is the one that's really taken off, and it's been a long time now that I've been doing that one. So I've been Gal Holiday longer than I've been any of those other things. Yeah.
So Appalachian upbringing.
Yes.
How does that influence the honky tonk?
In fact, it doesn't really. The Appalachian was very early in my life until I was about 5, and then we moved back when I was about 12. And in the way that I grew up surrounded by a lot of music. It's not necessarily that it influences honky tonk specifically, but just music in general, because everyone in that, it's not even just in Appalachia, I guess, but in rural communities, there are limited entertainment functions for people to participate in, and so what you have a lot of times is after a long working day, people will just bring out their instruments and sit around and play music. And so there was a lot of that in my life, and then a lot of barn dances and things like that. And people that love to dance and love to celebrate music and life, I think in general. Music goes along with the seasons. People are very in tune with harvest seasons and things like that. So you have dances that go along with harvest seasons. And it's very much like that here in these areas as well, in Louisiana. So for me, it informed more what I found with the people in Louisiana and the people where I come from. It's similar as far as the rural kind of, now of course I live in New Orleans, it's not rural, but it's sort of the love of music and that respect for the cycle of, the way that things go and the way that that sort of ties into music and all of that.
I'm also from Appalachian.
Are you? Where are you from?
Mountains of North Carolina.
Okay.
Wilkes County.
Yeah, and I come from the very tippy top of the Appalachians, which is, like Western Maryland. So you're sort of getting in, your Blue Ridge there instead of Smokies, and it's a little bit different, but it's very, very similar. And actually, the gentleman who's playing lead guitar with us now, Abram Racine, he's been playing with us only really since like last year in the fall. He's from West Virginia as well. So, he's got that same sort of upbringing with especially fiddle culture and all of that.
So, and any other questions, jump in. So why Honky Tonk in New Orleans? I mean, New Orleans, of course, is known for jazz and blues.
Sure.
So, and tell us also kind of about the culture that's coming out in New Orleans right now with that.
Yeah, so, I mean, in New Orleans, clearly honky tonk music is not the norm, or at least it's not as well known to be the norm. I actually discovered a lot of information about that, which wasn't influenced in my decision to play this kind of music. Really, this band was just a function of, at that time, my love for rockabilly and western swing. We used to do a lot more rockabilly, we used to do a lot more western swing. And these folks who are here today will attest to that, because we actually talked about the western, the swing stuff yesterday. And the honky tonk, I actually, where I grew up and when I grew up, it was not really that cool to listen to country music, mid-90s in rural, if you listened to country music, you were a hick. And, and I was sort of not trying to identify with that, like in my high school, you either listened to hip hop and or heavy metal or country music. And those two really did not mix, culturally.
Right.
So when I came to New Orleans, I came because I loved music and I wanted to do music more. And I had found rockabilly, and I had discovered that not all country music is achy breaky heart, which at the time to me sounded terrible. Now it sounds like great country music. But your ears change just as your palate changes, your ear changes. And so I discovered through rockabilly music that I really liked Johnny Cash, and that I really liked Hank Williams, and that, oh my gosh, my grandparents listened to Patsy Cline, and what? That's country music? So maybe I do like country music. And it really is just growing up and, discovering, discovering what things really are, how the world works. And so I started to dig deeper into country music and discovered that I really liked it, and then started discovering that there are a lot of roots in the old country music, not just in Louisiana and, but also specifically in the city of New Orleans. For example, Hank Williams coming down there, and that people, when I first started the band, there were a lot of people that were naysayers, that did not believe that our band was ever going to be popular or make it. And there's just a lot of people that like to talk trash anyway, give anybody anything to talk trash about. They're negative, they're gonna do it. So we started playing around, we actually started the band before Katrina, and it broke up and had a lot of changes after the storm. People moved away and whatever, but we started playing in the city heavily just a month after the storm. And there were a lot of contractors from Oklahoma and from all of these places that were staying in all the hotels. And we packed the bar every night, playing old Hank Williams stuff and all of that. And then when the locals came back, we discovered that there's this huge connection to it, that people remember their mom and daddy or their, their papa and their mima listening to this old stuff, and they had, oh, I still have that ticket stub that my grandparents went to see Hank Williams at the blah blah blah, or they went to see Elvis, or they did this. And there's a huge connection to that. And then the Cajuns too have a huge connection to country music. They play, a lot of the Cajun bands still play a lot of old country songs. And there's that big crossover between Hank Williams playing, creating songs that were in the Cajun style, quote unquote, and all of that. So we did discover that there's a huge, want for that in New Orleans. And I think the city loves good music no matter what. So if you play something that anybody can dance to, they don't care if it's Cajun, if it's Zydeco, if it's jazz, if it's blues, if it's country. And there traditionally were just a couple of bands back in, like early 80s that started. Kim Carson is one who came out of New Orleans, and she tours a lot in Europe and in Texas and in California. But she's a bit older than me. She's just that next sort of generation of people that had been doing it like in the 80s and 90s. There was also a Western swing band in New Orleans called, it's escaping me. I might need another cup of coffee to remember it. But there was another, like a Western swing band that played a lot in the 80s, just for fun. They didn't really tour or anything. And so now we move to, you asked about what's happening now. And since I don't like to say that we started the wave of country bands in New Orleans, but we kind of started the wave of country bands in New Orleans. And a lot of these bands, I went, after Katrina, I didn't really leave New Orleans until about 2010, when my partner at the time, who incidentally is from Natchitoches, and it's the reason that we started coming up here, Dave Briette, and we decided we needed to get out of Dodge for a little bit, because it was just, we'd been there a lot for a long time, and so we went out and traveled back and forth from California. I say from the left coast to the Gulf Coast. We traveled back and forth for about 2 years, which is when that album Last to Leave sort of developed as our sort of very late hurricane evacuation album, hence the title Last to Leave. And when we started coming back to town, when we actually came back to town in 2012, the landscape of music had changed vastly. None of these young bands knew who the heck Gal Holiday was, but these young musicians had come from all over the Carolinas, particularly, all over the Midwest. I mean, people had come from Oregon. Everyone, as they do, young folks love to come down to New Orleans and play music. It's been that way forever. And they bring their own sensibilities and their own sound, but what they didn't realize is they were stepping into something that had already, groundwork had already been laid for that. So it was a lot of old-timey kind of sounds, fiddle tunes and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of bluegrass circles that started up and all this kind of stuff too. And now, out of that scene, have grown all of these country bands, including some bands like Pat Reedy, who've gotten picked up on Muddy Roots and everything, and is touring on big tickets in Europe and everything, which is great. I mean, it's just there's just really great bands that have grown out of the scene. And it might have started with us, but it certainly had nothing to do with me curating or developing anything. It's just it just was a crazy blossom effect, which is awesome.
Maybe because of you guys, people saw the need and the niche.
Well, we did sort of lay the groundwork for I've always had a very strong email list. And so, the people who come to dance to us also come to see a lot of Cajun and Zydeco bands. And there are these fado-dos that are put on around town. And then also these folks would come and they'd go, oh, well, Vanessa and Gal Holiday, the band, they play at these venues. So we know that these are Americana or, Americana-friendly venues, and we like to dance at this bar and this bar and this bar. And then they see that these other bands are playing at these places, and then they become fans of those bands as well. So it really is fan-driven. The fan community in this scene of music, the diehard fans, the ones that like to come and dance, it's very small. New Orleans is not a big city as compared to other metro areas. So I'm going to say there's just a few hundred people that come, they don't come to every show, but they come consistently, and there are some that come every time, and they go out dancing 5-6 nights a week, and they have seeked out these other bands in these venues.
Questions? No?
What's your feelings of, I keep hearing you say old country. I think you know from us we're old country. You know, I turn on the radio now and country is not country to me.
It's called New Country,
You know,
and you also have hip hop and all kinds of other things.
yeah, but you lose the dance beat, I guess is what it is.
Yes, some of it you do. I mean, I think within country music, so, you know, in general, country music fans, since the very beginning of what we would call country music, like when I think about that, I think about, you know, like 1940s and 1950s, right? Sort of the beginning of when it wasn't even called country music then, you know, it was hillbilly music or something like that. But a lot of people, fans of country music tend to be more conservative, traditionally. You know, they come from rural communities that are very traditional, and so anytime there's a change in country music, there's always been, you know, people, oh gosh, you know, here goes this one, here comes Johnny Cash, who does he think he is? You know, I mean, it's the same kind of thing. Drums were never even allowed on the stage because drums were associated with black music, and people did not want that on the stage at that time. You know, this is like, we're talking early 1940s, and drums were not allowed on the stage at the Grand Ole Opry. They were not allowed. So the upright bass player had like a little drum thing on the side and little brushes that hung from the upright bass, you know, and then the drummer would sit off behind stage, and the audience didn't know there was a drummer. But where was that amazing beat coming from? You know, so like when things change and then you bring the drums on stage and oh Lord, it's the devil's music. You know, it's gonna get the kids too riled up. You know, it's gonna be rock and roll all of a sudden, and people didn't have any idea what that was. So I think that there is room within country music for all of these things. I don't have to like Taylor Swift. I mean, I think she's adorable and she writes good songs, but to me, it's not really country music. I mean, especially the stuff that, you know, the stuff that she came out, which was clearly not intended to be country music. But even when she first came out, I don't think it was country music. But people also, you know, didn't think that Johnny Cash was doing anything that was, you know, so I think the definition of it changes and there's room within it for expansion. You know, the older we grow, the less we understand younger people. I am now 42 years old, and I actually do like pop music, and I like all of these things, you know what I mean? Because you have to sort of like listen to what's going on, but at the same time you don't have to understand it, because it's not for me. It's not music that's made for me. It's made for teenagers and people in their early 20s, and that's great. They should have their own thing. You know, this new, what's the new song, is it Old Town, what's it called? The Road?
Old Town Road.
Old Town Road, you know what I mean? Like, good for them. I wish they'd gotten a better rapper, because the rap is really dumb. But like, I sort of enjoy that aesthetic of like, okay, you know, like, when you go, I want to say this too, when you go to a country bar, like in Leesville or something like that, near the Army base, there's a country band that plays, and then they want you to take a 45-minute break so the ladies can line dance to hip hop. It's like, what is this? You know, like, so I think the answer to your question is there is room within it, and there is still, if you're interested in the stuff that's coming out now that you would really enjoy, I would recommend looking into, you know who Dale Watson is? So Dale Watson has this amazing, he's kind of trying to do this, you know, this designation that's called a Metropolitan, which is sort of trying, it encompasses honky tonk, outlaw, rockabilly, and western swing. It's those 4 specific designations of music, and they started off just doing an award show in Austin, and now it's happening outside of Memphis, or in Memphis. But if you enjoy the kind of stuff that we play, that Gal Holiday plays, and that older sounding stuff, or that more traditional sounding stuff, I would recommend checking out the artists that are nominated on Ameripolitans, because there is an incredible amount of great music that's coming out, but it's gonna be played on smaller stations, you know, like NPR kind of stations around the country, and smaller platform stations. It's not gonna be played on Clear Channel. stations or modern, more modern country stations, because they have a very specific algorithm of what they are allowed to play, and they're not allowed to play Gal Holiday. So unless there's, like every once in a while they are given like a little loosened up kind of thing. I'm not exactly sure how it works because I'm not on a big label and I don't have that kind of thing. But check out Ameripolitan and some of those bands. There's some amazing music coming out from all over the country. Yeah.
Can you take us through your songwriting process, or do you have a songwriting process? You have some great words and songs.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely a lyricist at heart. I wrote a lot of poetry, angsty poetry as a teenager, most of which is just a bunch of garbage and, feelings exploded onto paper, as teenagers do. But my process is basically I am like a batch songwriter. I don't write consistently. I know some folks will get up every morning and write a little bit, and maybe if you are a dedicated writer of some sort, then it is good for you. It's to exercise that muscle, but I just don't write like that. I used to have a little tape recorder that I carried around before they were, the fancy cell phones, little computers in our pocket these days. I used to have a tape recorder that I'd carry around in the car if I thought of something at a red light. Now I have voice notes on my phone, and the notepad in there. And I will record little things. I might think of a melody and sit at the piano and just record for a second. And then every once in a while a song comes just pouring out. That's unusual when that happens. Certain songs like In My Dreams Again, which is on our new album. Yeah, that's a very sentimental song, and it's about my grandfather. And, I am very honored and I don't even know what to say. Honored is not the correct word. Again, more coffee maybe. I've had a lot of people that have told me that song has just brought them to tears at shows and stuff. And it is. That one. So that song I struggled with for years. I mean, I've been writing that song because I wanted it to be right. And perfect. I wanted it to be right. It's about my grandpa, and he is probably the most important person in my life growing up. One of those people that when you're having a hard time getting along with your parents, you can just go, and he just understands you. And stop. It's okay. But the songwriting process is very different for every song. But generally, my songs start with lyric because I am a lyricist, and to me, the lyric is a really important part of country music because country music is about the story. That, for me, is one of the most important tenets of country music, is the storytelling aspect of it. And but that's not to say that chords, because a lot of my songs don't have typical chord structure either. I feel like there are ways that you can structure chords and music that make you feel that when paired in the right place in a song, change the feeling of something, whether you go from a major to a minor, or even an augmented something, or you just have these sort of, like on South of I-12, there's this one sort of chord progression that we do that makes you feel like it makes you feel very unstable for a second, because that song is about instability. So I think I always come from lyrics first, and then try and think of to sit down at the piano, and I write on the piano because I don't play guitar. So yes, it is. And I tried it the other way because I had for a time with Dave Briette and this other guy who played guitar with us, Dave James. They were incredible. They were not really lyricists. They were more into creating beats and sounds. and we tried it for a little bit of like bringing like, they would record a little bit of something and bringing it to me, and then I would try and put lyrics over it, and I found that incredibly difficult. Some people can work like that. Some people can work like that. That's not how my brain works. And so, you know, on this latest album, it all came from lyric first. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting process, and I guess, like, looking back, I was writing songs even as a kid. But because I come from a classical piano background, I would actually write things out in staff form, you know, and now I've learned just to, you know, sort of let that part of it go. Like, there are certain specific lines which I want guitar players or lead players in my band to learn, you know, but basically I just write out the chords now and let people improvise over what they want to do. Yeah, exactly. It goes C, G. Yeah. Thank you.
So is this a new band that you're playing with now?
Some people are and some people aren't. So the band now consists of Justin LeCure on acoustic guitar, Corey McGillivray on upright bass. They have been playing with me. I hired them right before the last time we went to Europe, which was not last year, but the year before. We were in Europe in the summertime, and they came in the spring at some point. And and then Tony Fricky on the drums is a good friend of theirs who comes out of the country scene. He used to play with Pat Reedy and a bunch of other people too. And he came, we had a young woman named Rose Cangelosi who wrote a couple songs for our latest album, and played with me for a few years. After summer tour last year, she decided she was gonna move on to other things, and she's a great songwriter, and she just needed more. She's very young as well, so she went away, and Tony came in, and he's been fantastic for us. We love him. And then Abram Racine was sort of just a fill-in last year. We had a number of, lead guitar has always been the most rotating member of the band. But Abram came in as just a sub last fall, and then came in full-time this spring. And yeah, we have had this past couple of years has been really kind of crazy with lead guitar players. Jimbo Mathis came in, and Jimbo is one of the founding members of Squirrel Nut Zippers. He's a Mississippi blues man who is just a wild and crazy. I mean, he is just. I call him my spirit animal. He's been a good friend, and if you ever met him, you would understand why. He is one of the most creative and eccentric musical minds that I have ever had the chance to encounter, and he's just an inspiration to me. And he came to New Orleans. He called me one day and he said, "Gal," I said, he said, "I got an idea." I was like, "Oh Lord, here we go." And he was coming down to New Orleans. He's got a lot of his band is out of New Orleans these days. He's sort of brought the Squirrel Nut Zippers back. They were a platinum record selling band in the 90s, who I loved when I was a young person, yes. And then had the honor of touring with as well years ago when they decided they were going to bring it back. But now they have a true revival of the band going on, and so he comes out of New Orleans a lot, and a lot of his players come out of New Orleans, and so he came down and he wanted to sort of make these super band in the studio and record some stuff, and he did a little bit of that, and then he was staying down there. He had basically a sabbatical from Squirrel Nut Zippers because they switched to a bigger booking agent or something like that, and they needed some time to catch up. So we had about 3 months, and he came down and rented a little place and played lead guitar with us for 3 months, which was incredible. And the song we played yesterday, "Fallen Angel," is on his new album, and so it's been this great crossover of working with him. and now he's out on the road with his band Incinerator, so we can't have him anymore. But lead guitar is, Abram is great and we love him, but there's so many great players, in New Orleans, and I'm just grateful to have worked with a lot of them. Yeah, so a lot of them, yes.
I was going to ask you what it was like working with Jimbo. I saw that on your website.
Yeah, I mean, I miss him every day. We have not really done songwriting together, but he writes songs that suit me. And I think he has a couple of songs that he wants to write, he wants to write for us. So we have 2 songs on our latest album, which vary a little bit from our usual sound. Loose Diamonds, which is sort of more of I always say it's a loose character study about a loose character named Loose Diamonds, but it's sort of more like Memphis soul almost, or like a Memphis. It's kind of like a bluesy soul thing. It's certainly not honky tonk, but it fits in with what we do because we are not strictly honky tonk, I guess. We do the Western swing, we do the rockabilly. The whole Revue, R-E-V-U-E, came from the fact that we play songs that are blues songs, like the one we couldn't play for you yesterday, the Brain Cloudy Blues, which was then also Western swing song. Sit on Top of the World, which was a blues song originally. So, all the different styles. And then he also wrote Wayward Wind, which is sort of more like I would say, it's like a sea captain song or something. It's got like a little bit of a different kind of feel to that one too, at 6/8. But I would like to write with him, and working with him was incredible because he just hears things that other people don't hear. And he has a great energy on stage. He's just a kook. That's, he really is. And he truly is a genuinely good human being. Which, translates, and he wants everybody to feel good and to sound good. And that's sometimes rare in a lead guitar player. You get a guy who comes up there and just plays over everything and whatever, and he really listens and he really wants everybody to sound their best on stage. So it's great. It was great working with Jimbo.
So, historically speaking, I'll get back to modern, but historically speaking, if you could wave the magic wand, is there anyone you would want to have played with?
To have played with?
Mm-hmm. Would you want them up on stage with Gal Hall?
Oh man, I mean, to be able to sing with so many of these other people, for me it's always been about the singers. There's a lot of great guitar players and bass players and drummers and pedal steel and fiddle and all of the other things. But for me, it's always about singers. My influences have always been harmony singers. I would have loved to have sung with Buck Owens. That's one of the things. It's like, he actually sang the harmony parts in that band. When you hear those 2 voices, a lot of times he was taking the harmony. I would have loved to have sung with him. I would still love to sing with Willie Nelson. He's still alive. Can we make that happen? Yeah, I would have Hank Thompson too. As far as Western swing bands go, I think Hank Thompson is probably my favorite. He had a great voice. Bob Wills had great bands, but he was kind of a
Different sounding.
He was kind of a not very nice person. So, I don't know that I would want to have met him. He was kind of a jerk to his bands and, would drink too much and fire people on a whim and things like that. So, I'm not sure I would want to play in his band. But Hank Thompson, really, for me, as far as Western swing goes, is one of my favorites, for sure. Yeah.
All right, so currently working, I know you said Willie Nelson, but anybody else?
Yeah, Justin, our acoustic guitar player, does a song that we played yesterday that was written by Romulo the Mavericks. Yeah, and Raul has, for me, the best voice in country music. He's an incredible singer. I mean, like, to the point where, I mean, you know, everybody talks about back in the day George Jones being the best country singer out there, and yes, incredible voice. It's a lot of people that have incredible voices, but if you listen to the quality of Raul Malo's voice, it just is far superior to most people that I've had the pleasure of listening to live in particular. I'd love to sing with him. I'd love to sing with Lyle Lovett too. He's got a great band. I mean, come on. You know, I've seen him at Jazz Fest twice. In fact, I think one of the years we might have opened the stage. Like when I say opened the stage, you know, we played at 11 a.m. and he played at 6 or 5, you know. But we opened the stage. We did. We opened for Willie Nelson too. Yeah. So, but I would say those couple of bands. We're getting hand signals from the back of the room there. All right.
Okay. Anything we didn't ask you wanted to talk about?
Oh, I don't know. Any other questions? I don't know. What else would I talk about? Let me talk about me more. No. I don't know. I just feel like, you know, very grateful to be, well, I have to say, I thought this was really a cute thing. So I am not from Louisiana, right? This year marks 20 years. In November, it'll be 20 years that I've lived in New Orleans. I know, time flies. And Shane Rasmussen's wife said to me yesterday, she said, well, you're a Louisianan now. She said, you didn't grow up here, but you got here as quickly as you could. So, and I thought that was really cute and fun. It made me feel good. You know, in New Orleans, people say, are you from here? I say, yeah. And they say, where'd you go to school? And they don't mean college. They mean high school. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not from here, but I've lived here for 20 years, and I've been here from, you know, Katrina, save for Katrina. And they're like, well, okay, well, you're from here. So, but it has been a great place to explore music. And the longer I live in Louisiana, you know, I live in New Orleans, and I don't think I probably would ever move outside of New Orleans unless I was forced to, just because I love my neighborhood and I love my people. But I do travel all around the state, and I love the state, and I have friends in all, you know, lots of different little towns and communities around the whole Gulf Coast, really. And, you know, I just enjoy the region so much. And it's been wonderful to find that the music that I have grown to love, you know, I've really grown to love the style of music, you know, has been accepted, and that people have accepted Gal Holiday, because I never really expected any of this to happen, or to still have this band after 14 years. I have a teenager, so it's been great. Yeah. Yeah. I've never met Harry Connick Jr. I know. Maybe one of these days. I mean, he's around. What a great voice he's got, too. Yeah. Thank you. Or maybe I'm right up there with him instead of he's been doing a lot longer than me. My goodness. What a person. No, I never saw him, but I do have to say, one of the big highlights of my career was singing with Dr. John, rest in peace. That was a really heartbreaking loss this year. I mean, we've lost so many amazing people recently, Art Neville and everybody too, but, and Alan Toussaint, but I got a chance to sing with Dr. John in Lafayette on a big concert. I sang 5 songs with him, and that was an amazing thing. Yeah. So, but maybe Harry Connick Jr. one of these days.
Well, thank you for that. So we're out of time.
We're getting the axe.
Yep.
Well, thank y'all so much for coming early in the morning, and come see us at 3 o'clock
We'll
today.
be there.
Today.
Thanks. Matching outfits today?
Sort of. Just me and Corey.
Okay.
The rest of the band, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.